All right. Nine, is it okay for me to take over now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Uh, it's sort of good to see everybody here, and Ruby, we're glad to have you here. Delighted. We are super glad to have you, and hope you'll join our class. There is a younger class that you probably belong in, but but we're delighted to have Curtis's mom with. She and I had a conversation about her staying and sending Curtis back, but I guess he'll stay too. Uh,
I second that.
uh, yeah, right. That is a really important thing to consider, isn't it? As always, technology is a challenge, and in my condition, it makes it a lot worse for me to try to get things going. But I think we got it going for now, and we got a number of folks online as well. We welcome everyone. And today our lesson is pretty straightforward. We haven't going to have lots of background material to cover, so we're going to get a chance to sort of talk about how do we apply this. There are many symbols along the way in life that are symbols of protection, and our topic today is about protection. And I want to ask, first of all, uh, what is the basic function of government? What would you consider the basic function of government?
Protect our country.
Protect, protect, uh, protect everybody, not just the land, but the people. That's a basic function, and that's the one. Maybe you have some others, but that's the one that I wanted, and believe it or not, Nana came up with it. I'm surprised. Uh, uh, what is the oh, that will be a first. Then the second is, what is the basic function for a law? A law. I'm looking at you now. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, Willene and I were turning off of Highway 11 the other day, and a woman, two uh, cars behind us hit her car, and that car hit us, and so Willene let the window down and said, "Are you drunk?" She said, "No." I said, "Yes." But then the doctor, whatever they call him, policeman, he was very, very kind. We got a great police department. They were kind. They saw how old Marlene was. And they just treated her with. I told him he was wondering how old I was, and he said, "Oh, that means you're 79." He at least he does math very well. But yeah, well, I'm a little older than Johnny. Yeah, about a month.
I
Uh,
heard that.
Johnny is trying to get in on this. Johnny, you just be quiet. I got one in here I'm trying to handle. Uh, but the law is the basic function is to protect, and we of course survey that a little more. All right, then, how many of you own a slave?
Well, my wife owns one.
Well, are you a slave for life?
Yes.
Okay. Then, Joe Allen, what I want you to do is, according to the law, take him up to the door and get a sharp object and drive it through his earlobe, because that's exactly, yeah, that's right.
Oh,
That's exactly what the law said in the Old Testament regarding a slave for life, is that's exactly what they did. So next week, I hope you'll be certified. I want you to be certified. Yeah. You know, but but my question for asking that is, none of us, of course, own a slave. So how we're into deep water here. We're talking about a text that is not applicable in terms of what we do, but what is the reason for continuing to study things of this nature? What's the reason? Well, I think it's important to for us to read this text because there are principles here. There are principles in the Old Testament. There are those who say that we ought to remain we are a New Testament church, therefore we ought to disengage from the Old Testament. But we cannot understand the New Testament without understanding the Old Testament. Augustine said, in the Old Testament, the New Testament is concealed, and the New Testament, the Old Testament is revealed. And so studying the Old Testament is very, very important in terms of how we understand what it does and how it applies today. I want to simply go back and look at some of the ways in which the law offered protection. First of all, it offered protection for slaves in that day. Of course, they had slaves, and the law stated that every seventh year the slave was turned loose for that year. And so, in some sense of the word, even though there were slaves, and again, some slaves in that day were not just slaves against their will. Many of them were indentured slaves, like indentured people in the early England. In England, they agreed to be a slave because of for many reasons. Masters were protected or prohibited from physically abusing their slaves. What is one of the great dangers of power? To be abuse, right? Abuse is a danger for anybody that is in power, and so that it protected them from the masters. Then laws concerning personal injury, injuries caused by violence or negligence were compensated, and Larry did a good job of getting us through the Big Ten. But now we are looking at the 613 that will morph into even a larger number of laws in the Jewish writings. So the laws continue to be built on the other. And if we were to get into that discussion right now, how do you interpret the law? Man, that gets very complicated. We know that even in our system, the Supreme Court right now, it's become a political thing, and it's hard to manage the Supreme Court in our country. And obviously, it has certain people bring certain ideologies even to our highest court. But there it was in that day the principle of an eye for an eye, a tooth for tooth. One of the laws, which you may have read in preparation, is the fact that if you're a slave and your master knocks out your tooth, he is supposed to give you freedom. I thought in my own thinking that would be a good way to get out of being a slave, wouldn't it? I wouldn't mind losing a tooth for that. But that's what it said, but along with many, many other things. Then, of course, there's laws regarding property, restitution for stolen or damaged property. Same way we have that. But I like this because the law becomes a marker or boundary. Even today, even we are not bound by the law. It has nothing to do about regarding our salvation, but the laws are very, very important. They are markers. They keep us in the between the ditches, and so laws are important in that regard, but not for our salvation. And then laws for the protection of the poor. Of course, we'll look at this in in Leviticus, and of course, one person's name ought to come to your mind when you think of that. And of course, there were laws regulating loans. A Jew when he loaned money to another Jew was not to charge any interest at all. But then, if you loaned to someone else, there were laws regarding heavy interest that was paid. Then there were laws on marriage and family. Women, even though we know that women were considered to be property, there were laws to protect them and regarding unjust treatment. A man could divorce his wife, however, a woman couldn't divorce her husband, but she was protected by that legal document. And then, of course, we remember levirate marriage. Two things here. One, regarding the Ruth, we have two things in the law that were a part of Ruth. You remember, levirate marriage was designed if a man dies without an heir, his brother was to take that on that responsibility, or the near kinsman, which is a part of the story of Ruth, the beautiful story about our continuing understanding of our redemption, but also in the next law we will see that, of course, levirate comes from the word Levi, like Leviticus does, and the Levites were the priests, so all of that connects together. In terms of the laws, there was the community was to take measures to prevent the spread of disease, including quarantine for those who were with contagious illnesses. And there are periods in history when they have noticed that the Jews survived many different quarantines and other things regarding different diseases because they followed strict dietary and other laws. But this is the one that I want to mention. When we moved our church from North Clayton County to Fayetteville, Georgia. I think I've told you that how we named that church, but just for my sake, I'll tell it again. And that is, we had difficulty naming the church. We were Second Baptist Church of College Park. We had one man that wanted to be Second Baptist of College Park of Fayette County or Fayetteville. And so naming the church, got to be a problem. We were located originally on a dairy. We moved next door to a dairy, and one of our staff members wanted to name it the Utter Baptist Church. But we decided not to do that. But Hugh Don Davis was my neighbor, a farmer, and a wonderful, wonderful friend. And Hugh Don was concerned about being a farmer, and of course he had a bull that was mean, and so he decided he would sell it, and he sold it to a young man, cautioning him about the bull. He bought it, he carried it out to his pasture. The family waited for him to come home. He never came home, and he was found dead in the pasture because the bull had gored him to death. In ancient law, in that law, the owner could have been put to death, particularly if he failed to tell or warn somebody about that. I can see why, because Hugh Don grieved greatly over that, because this is a young man with young children, and how horrible he must have felt as a result. So laws, that's what their basic function is. There were also the laws about honesty. We've heard people talk about putting the finger on the scale of justice, but also the putting the finger on the scales in the store. Barry, your daddy, did he sell meat, fresh meat, and all in the store he had? Or he had?
He had a wholesale candy business, but then he went into the restaurant business. And that was about, yeah, he didn't sell meat. He sold hamburgers.
Oh, okay. Well, you may remember those stores where they had the scales that cut the meat and all that, but it's easy to just slip your finger up there and make it a little heavier than it should be. But anyhow, they had weights and measures, and workers were paid daily. I had the unique opportunity to go with one of my congregates in South Georgia to his peach farm one day, and he had migrant workers coming, and they filled the peach baskets up and would come and pour those peaches into the big bin, and they would get a ticket at the end of the day. They brought their ticket to him, and ever how much many tickets they had according to the price, they were paid for their labor that day. In that day, we're talking about the same thing. Jesus says, we're grateful for our daily bread. Those people lived literally from day to day in terms of their food. And so there were workers to be paid in an honest way. These laws, among others, were given to establish a just and compassionate society where the rights and well-being all individuals, especially the vulnerable, were protected. So laws, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are laws that God put in the Bible protecting vulnerable people. There are many of them, too many for us to go through in terms of a lot of laws and ways in which God related to people, and those were well documented. I happened on this. I thought this was a very good way for us to hear this lesson today. When you put two ears side by side, that's before you do what you're going to do to Art, Joel. It looked like a heart. And interesting, the word ear sits right in the middle of the word heart. And the ear is the way to the heart. So if you want someone's heart, learn to listen. A friend of mine who we met after he had a serious brain swelling, and he was never the same after. We did not know him when he was a whale man, but he apparently was a wonderful guy. As a result, he was impaired because of the swelling of his brain, but a wonderful human being. At his funeral, his pastor said, "When Ralph smiles, you can see all the way to his heart." And we need to be heart conscious in terms of how we relate to other people. When I saw this as a part of our lesson, introducing our lesson, it just reminded me of what we know is going on and has been going on at our border with all of the sex trafficking and all these kids that are left unprotected. And we have over thousands of them that we're going to try to find and find some way to protect them. Our lesson focuses on exploitation, on lending practices, and one other that we'll get to that I can't remember right now. But the first is exploitation. It's easy to exploit the vulnerable. That is, people who are weak and are unable to protect themselves. Would someone read this text for us, please?
You must not exploit a resident alien or oppress him, since you were resident aliens in the land of Egypt. You must not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them, they will no doubt cry to me, and I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will burn, and I will kill you with the sword. Then your wives will be widows and your children fatherless.
The vulnerable, whenever you think about what Jesus's ministry was mostly comprised of, who did Jesus normally go and meet needs? It was people who were sick, people who could not talk, people who were mentally ill, out of their mind, people filled with demons. But yet he often would address those who were there, who were people that over them were taking advantage of them. You remember the miracle of the when the demons are cast into the pigs and the pigs went into the water, what were the merchants or the owners concerned about? The pigs going into the water, loss of their income, etc. And so it's very easy for us in our place of wealth or authority to take advantage. And so even in that day, he was reminding the Israelites, once you were sojourners, you were in Egypt in slavery, and you were temporary residents and aliens in that land. Now that and you need to be aware that there are others like that who are faced with the same kind of vulnerabilities, and he points that out in this text. The next one is the lending practices. Someone read this text.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Am I taking that right? It says, I will take the sword and I will kill you. Is that Jesus talking?
No.
That's God?
No, this is the Old Testament text. Let me go back.
So that's God saying that he will kill.
Yeah, but and I'm not sure, and if he's saying this literally or not. But what I would certainly understand that God is sovereign, and He's going. To me, it is a word of saying, "I'm going to take care of them. They're going to be protected." And when we get to the New Testament in the Sermon on the Mount, once again, he reiterates, that is, Jesus reiterates the fact that those who are less vulnerable, whatever, are the ones he focuses on. And that's what I think. Always, anything I say, vet it, check it, because I can be wrong.
Well, that was his way of penalizing people.
Well, of protecting, of reassuring the people that he is our Father. He is going to protect them. And if you get taken advantage of, I'm going to hear. I believe the text also says, cry out to me, and he'll hear their cry.
Right. I got you. I can hear it anyway. I mean, he's gonna hear it anyway.
But
I mean, God listens to our prayers all the time. So, but he's definitely gonna hear these louder, I guess.
at least they're going to be heard by God when they're not heard by someone else, for sure.
He's gonna act upon those that cry to him.
I really think so, and I think we think in terms of the world that we live in. Who do we honor? We honor those that are in power, those who are famous, those who are rich. On and on you go. It's those positions and those who are. I honestly believe one of my heroines is Osceola McCarthy, that I mentioned in this class, who was lived in a shack in Mississippi and worked for people who she took care of them, pressed their clothes, was a seamstress, and saved enough money to give $150,000 in scholarship to, I believe it's Mississippi, Southern Mississippi. And to me, there are going to be in heaven, there are going to be people that are among the anonymous that we've never heard of in this life, who are going to be seen and honored there, is my opinion.
Yeah.
Humble opinion.
Well, this made me think, because God, these people that do that, they're evil.
Mm-hmm.
And he's gonna kill or punish the evil. And it brought up to my mind that when he was letting them go into the promised land, he told them to go in there and kill everybody. And I often wondered, why would he do that? But I've read stuff that the people there were so evil already that he wanted them wiped out.
And what happens when you associate with evil people?
You become evil.
It's infectious, isn't it? It's infectious. Yeah.
So evil that
Yeah.
he didn't want them,
Eh,
he wanted them wiped out.
Yeah, there's so much about this I don't understand because, but I understand the aspect that you can be, you know, if uh, you can soar like eagles, but if you hang around,
Turkey.
turkeys, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned
Why'd
that.
you look at me for?
Yeah, Art, you may have the same problem. I don't go out in the woods during turkey season, but turn my head because I'm afraid somebody will see and think I'm a turkey. Yeah. Uh, but then we move on to the lending. Someone read that for us.
If you lend to my people, the person among you, you must not be like a creditor. You must not charge him interest. If you ever take your neighbor's cloak as collateral, return it to him before sunset. For it is his only covering, it is the clothing for his body. What will he sleep in? And if he cries out to me, I will listen because I'm gracious.
And I work for sometimes with the for Humanity. That was one of the things that they did was to uh, provide homes, but not free. The persons had to pay back, but their principle was not to charge interest following this law. But we do know that in Jesus's day, that whenever a person had to give up their outer garment, they were left unprotected in the cold night. So even if you took it as if they had to go by the pawn shop before they went home and pick up their coat so they can keep warm at night. So very practical things, and in terms of protecting those in lending practice. Now, someone read this on the reaping of crops.
You reap the harvest of your land, you are not to reap to the very edge of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not strip your vineyard bare or gather its fallen grapes. Leave them for the poor and the resident alien. I am the Lord your God.
If you go back to Leviticus earlier, in Leviticus, it actually gives the dimensions of how of the area that you are to leave. That's what amazes me in the detail of the Old Testament. It's so detailed in terms of what God did. I mean, when we get into looking at the temple furniture soon, it's amazing what the temple furniture and all the detail there. But immediately, who comes to your mind when you read this?
Ruth and both.
Ruth, absolutely. The Book of Ruth lives out exactly what these laws are about. And what we need to look at in terms of what we study, what is a good reason for studying these kinds of things in the Old Testament?
They're applicable to our lives today. I mean,
It-
how we treat people, our relationships with people.
right. Doesn't the grace of God and the mercy of God move our relationship and our worship and work for God out of the arena of obeying laws for righteous sake to a relationship? It just provides human dignity. And I read recently a well-known atheist who was saying how he was very discouraged because so many Christian institutions were being attacked. Even though he was an atheist, he saw the value in what Christian and what happens as a result of following Christ in the world. And so we are to make that kind of impression in our world. Believers are to care for vulnerable people. And I think we, particularly in this day, and we need to be aware, our age is very vulnerable. We're vulnerable to all kinds of scams and things that people use to take advantage of older people. And so we need to be aware of that. We in our family, particularly Willeen's mama, we had to Willeen had to be very careful and before she came to our home for that reason. Believers are to offer dignity to those in need, and we are to physically help those in need. And I get a little bit distressed because people don't recognize how much Christ has been what following Christ has done to the improvement of society forever in our world, and I'm grateful for that. However, I want to this picture is that those Floyd, you ever done this? Measured twice and cut once. Well, even
I always cut twice. How about you? Then I go back and measure again.
yeah, I'd forget what I had measured the first time before it got. But anyhow, we have to even the law. We know that the law, even abiding by the law, came up short at times, and we need to be reminded that we are not to live according to the law, but we're to live according to the grace of God. And the grace of God has been extended to us in such a way that we ought to really recognize the importance of doing those things for those who are vulnerable. And I think that's the essence of our lessons today. Further comments? Yes, Larry.
You mentioned the word principle. It's well, back in the day, all the laws, they served as principles for other things. There's two books in the Bible always bothered me, Leviticus is one of them. And Revelation is the other, which both, I've been here both of them today, but.
Yeah.
In Leviticus, they are establishing principles for establishing a society. The Jewish society and its expansion. That's no different than our country. We use this as establishing principles. We don't necessarily use the exact laws, we use them for establishing principles. Our forefathers did, and the principles of how this country would be founded, how it operates. Of course, we twist it, turn it, reinterpret it every 20 years or so. But it gives me a new perspective when you use the word principle. I don't know why that has been just one over my head, but it's a different way to look at it.
Well, if we so much of our foundation as a country was based on Old Testament, and this is, as you stated correctly, the building of a nation, calling of a people, and then giving them land and building a nation.
That's what we did with our country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same principles to build a nation.
And we're fighting hard to see that it continues on. But none of us want a theocracy. We could get into the thing regarding even debt. You know, we came here for religious freedom, and many came here to get free of debt in England, and our laws protect, and so that we basically, because we are in debt and fail, we don't go to prison for that. Now, if we commit fraud, yes, but if we fail simply because of bad luck, we can go bankruptcy and things of that nature. So protecting against being indebted, and I'm a capitalist, but if you wake up to reality, and most of us I think have, that our economy is based on keeping us enslaved to debt. So I always want a little, like a farmer who said, I don't want all the land in the world, just that's next to mine. Anybody else?
Ward, does everybody know him? He used to take up tickets at. The friend couldn't take her. That's on the.
it was rescheduled the first time, it was the third, because
Oh,
she couldn't take her. And so now, last week, she said it's gonna be the 22nd, which is Wednesday, but I don't know if they just called and asked her, if she's even asked somebody to take her, because she hadn't indicated that to me.
Weather may play a huge
That's
part in
what
that.
I thought too.
Yeah.
Well,
It's gonna be rough up there.
Also, she's hard to get information from.
Yeah.
Oh,
she went-
absolutely.
I tried to find out.
We're not really sure.
So, we don't really know.
Yeah.
That's why I was hoping she'd be here today.
And she's not here, so that makes me think she's sick. I don't know.
So we'll check on
Maybe they won't get out.
that.
That might be it.
Okay. And Henry,
I
He's-
told Henry this past week,
Oh, you
when Johnny Fain was here
mhm,
speaking, he was in a wheelchair
Yeah.
and, his wife, he looked great. And he said he would be fitted for a prosthesis soon.
mhm.
And, but he was in great spirits,
But
talking.
I want to correct something. Henry's a good guy, but he ain't never looked great. He's a great friend. I love Henry.
J. David that hurt him all the time, or
Yeah.
he took pain pills, was that because of that leg?
Yeah, that's it.
That was, yes, okay. Maybe that's why he looks better.
Well, he looked
Got
good.
rid of it, but,
While we're on the topic, Henry's in need of a collapsible battery operated wheelchair.
He's got one.
Yeah, he was in one the other day.
Yeah, he has one.
Yeah.
So he's on my homebound
Yeah,
list. He's one of the guys I go see.
yeah.
I didn't know if it belonged to him, but he was in one the other day.
But I don't know if that was his, but he has gotten one similar to mine. His is weighs less. Poor chair.
You got the Cadillac, and he got.
No, his is the Cadillac. Well, I just say poor chair.
Wheelchairs, the less they weigh, the more expensive.
yeah,
Can I tell you, do I have time to tell a little story that Henry told us?
I like.
Henry's a good guy. He's
Yeah.
great. Well, of course, the seniors come up to him and one of them came up and asked him to pray for his hearing. And he said, would you pray for my hearing? He said, I sure will. And he was so concerned about him not hearing, and he went to the elders and everything, talked to them and asked them to. He ran into him a couple of days, well, maybe a couple of weeks later, and he said, how's your hearing? He said, well, it's not until this summer.